honorable members of Parliament, distinguished members of the Council on Foreign Relations Ghana, invited guests, both here and those online, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased and honored to share my ideas with you on the state of our world, the pressing need for the renewal of multilateral and international institutions, including the increasing role of regional organizations in burden sharing in the major challenges that we face as a global community. In this lecture, I intend to focus particularly on the Commonwealth, which provides a unique setting for international cooperation with its 56 member states, one suspended though, across 5 different regions, including some of the largest and richest countries in the world, and some of the smallest and most vulnerable. I am most grateful to the Council on Foreign Relations Ghana for providing this unique forum, and also to Ambassador D.K. Osei for chairing this event. It is wonderful to see such great interest in the topic of our lecture, which is a vision for a new Commonwealth in a fast-evolving world. And I thank you all, both in person and online, for joining us. Friends, let me begin by pointing out the unique nature of the times we live in. Every period, every epoch has generally been described with a common descriptive phrase. For instance, there was consensus on the term Cold War and how it impacted geopolitics, the international rules-based system, and development cooperation. The current period in which we live has no distinctive description, signifying the high characteristics of disintegration or disorder. While the emergence of a multipolar world with the ending of superpower rivalry and the domination of one superpower was welcomed as a necessary correction, the process has in the immediate period deepened the challenges to forging effective multilateralism. As the general dissatisfaction with the international financial and governance architecture grows, and developing countries continue to engage their partners on a development cooperation framework that leads to resilience building and sustainability, other factors at play weaken the needed consensus. These include the fracturing and reconstitution of alliances, a new competition for geopolitical advantage, characterized by both traditional divisions and new players who are seeking to leverage their wealth to build influence. From the perspective of responding to global development challenges and threats to international peace and security, the impact of the jockeying for influence and power and the natural tendency to scramble for friends is not different from that which was driven by inequality between and among states and the unfair international economic order. Some, especially on social media, are rightly frustrated, but neither declaring a plague on both their houses nor engaging in protest diplomacy will result in the cooperation needed for our people and our planet to thrive. So now I present the Commonwealth as a solution. Mr. Chairman, friends, the Commonwealth provides an opportunity for its member states and people to reshape a world that is fit for the times we live in. Commonwealth has a population of 2.5 billion, and 60% of this population is aged 30 or younger. So by geographic size, global reach, and diversity, also by potential wealth, numbers, demographic data, and political profile, our Commonwealth should become the second most consequential organization of states globally. That is after the United Nations. Its charter provides a strong framework for promoting peace and prosperity, as well as modalities for cooperation among our member states, fostering friendship, fraternal dialogue, and mutual respect. Indeed, the Commonwealth has shown remarkable commitment to promoting prosperity, democracy and peace, justice and human rights, empowering women and young people, both boys and girls. Also shown commitment to amplifying the voices of small and vulnerable states, and also advocating for environmental protection in terms of the blue economy and climate change through the Commonwealth's Blue Charter. Commonwealth and its Secretariat's purpose, and this is articulated in the 2005 revised agreed memorandum on the Commonwealth Secretariat, and its subsequent revision in 2022, expected the Commonwealth Secretariat to expand and adapt pragmatically in the light of its experience to better carry out its functions. Those functions include support for developmental projects and technical assistance in a variety of fields on a multilateral basis. The leadership of the Commonwealth is to be commended for their innovation and hard work in increasing the Secretariat's accumulation of a reliable body of knowledge that has contributed to economic development and resilience building across all the member states of the Commonwealth. With its unique identity or DNA of little fuss or publicity, the Commonwealth has worked to strengthen democracy, including through election monitoring and good offices missions, as well as helping countries to manage their debts or apply for climate financing. We all hear about the Commonwealth observer teams that come into our countries during elections. And also through the good offices of the Secretary-General, you'd find her trying to douse fires as and when any such occurs during elections. Unlike large international agencies, it is a nimble organization of particular use to small island states and the lesser developed countries. The Commonwealth takes on projects too small for the big agencies, building the capacity of governments at the same time as it solves problems on the ground. Its reputation as an incubator of good ideas is well-deserved and needs to be built on further. The Commonwealth, for instance, developed a health worker protocol that was taken to scale by the World Health Organization. Also a vulnerability index that was taken to scale by the World Bank. It also reached an agreement on climate change that was approved globally at the Climate Summit in Paris. The challenges. Despite these remarkable achievements of the Commonwealth, we do not need to go behind the daily headlines to see that the world, in the words of our President, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and this is what he said, I quote, "The world is in a bad place," unquote. Whether it is in Commonwealth countries or the entire world, we do face existential and troubling challenges. Indeed, insecurity best describes our world. In the political, economic, social, environmental, and climatic spheres. The business and supply chain impacts of COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and the worsening climate events associated with climate change merely expose the failure of the Development Cooperation Framework, which was fashioned in the waning years of the Second World War. The weak resilience that characterizes the economies of Commonwealth developing countries can be traced to their marginalization in the multilateral trading system, with our very limited footprints on the global trade landscape. The shares of Pacific Island countries and African countries in world trade are manifestly below potential, at 0.03% for the Pacific Island countries and 3% for African countries. We operate at the periphery of the multilateral trading system with a narrow range of exports, mostly primary products, minerals, oil and gas. We all know what's happening. We cut out our raw materials in their very raw form, take it to other markets that add value to these materials and send them back to us. In the cases of the Caribbean and the Pacific, because of their very small populations, they lack economies of scale. And this is made worse by high transportation and marketing costs for the Pacific countries, because they are located very far from the key markets of Europe, or the United States, or China, or Japan. In addition to these constraints, their efforts to attract foreign direct investment have also not been very successful. They account for 0.1% of global investment flows. In nearly all Commonwealth countries, social mobility is stalling, even though the future world of work, including climate adaptation, opens new possibilities through the way we teach our young, leverage innovation and services through ICT, social media, automation, and artificial intelligence. Jobless growth, or wealth creation with high unemployment and rising cost of living, characterizes nearly all our economies. Commonwealth countries need to create over 50,000 decent jobs each day until 2030 in order to provide opportunities for our young people who are entering the labor market. It is estimated that, together, Commonwealth countries need to create 3 in every 5 jobs in the world, as the labor market in countries such as Japan, China, and Europe shrink. Within the Commonwealth itself, labor mobility does not correspond to the labor rigidities of our economies, denying markets the skills and resources that are needed to create goods and services which are needed to power greater inclusive growth and wealth creation. And we have failed to draw the link between young tech workers, the ubiquity of services they provide, and anxiety over physical migration. The Commonwealth has the world's largest, greatest vulnerability to climate change, because 33 of its members, 33 of the 56 members, are small states. As extreme weather events annually wipe out infrastructure and cause devastating droughts, challenging food security, and also impede other development goals in many Commonwealth countries, most notably in the small island developing states, the scope of the strategic failure for a common strategy around renewables is mind-boggling. there is no reason why we should not have a common strategy to deal with renewables. The devastating effects of climate change can be clearly seen in the many beautiful islands of the Commonwealth. With rising sea levels as a result of global warming, several islands are inundated with water. You may have read about the challenges faced by islands such as Kiribati, where apparently no part of its land rises more than 2 meters above sea level. This makes it one of the most vulnerable countries in the world. In many ways, African, Asian, Caribbean, and Pacific Island countries face similar challenges as far as climate change is concerned. We contribute very little to the emission of global greenhouse gases, yet we face disproportionate impacts of climate change. Whereas the Pacific Island countries and African countries account for only 0.03% and 4% of global emissions, respectively, we have been bearing the brunt of climate change ranging from floods, from cyclones, from droughts, from wildfires, drying up of our rivers. And it is estimated that the Pacific Island countries would need $1 billion United States dollars, which constitutes 6.5% to 9% of regional GDP for their climate financing needs. Africa would need 580 billion United States dollars by 2030 for our adaptation financing needs alone. But we only get a fraction of this. The Caribbean is the most exposed region to climate-related natural disasters, with estimated adaptation investment needs of more than 100 billion. And this is equal to about 1/3 of its annual economic output. Moreover, with electricity largely generated using fossil fuels, energy prices in the Caribbean are among the highest in the world, highlighting the need for investment in lower cost and lower carbon energy production. When you come to Asia, the projected climate finance needed from now to 2030 generally range from 1 to 2 trillion per year. Based on a previous report from ASP's commission, approximately 70 trillion will be required for the Asia-Pacific region to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. These needs could be even higher, depending on the scope of the region under consideration. If you look at the governance front, the situation is no different. Today, democracies are facing their greatest threat as governments are overwhelmed in responding to the expectations of its populations. Inequality threatens our societies, while the fraying of social protection systems opens our societies to threats from populists and ultra-nationalists, in some cases, violent extremists. Democratic governance, which in the face of the monumental challenges require consensus building and even more effective representation, is at its most fractured. No issue is immune from controversy, including apparently even settled national values. Commonwealth values are the ethos and strength of our family of nations. To respond to today's and a fast-changing world, we need to leverage those values and their outcomes to respond fully to the needs and aspirations of all our peoples. We can realize and sustain the democratic dividend for all Commonwealth citizens by, 1, building resilience across the Commonwealth, 2, responding effectively to the existential crisis of climate change and natural disasters, and 3, making the Commonwealth work for all its citizens. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies and friends, I've proposed 6 areas for repositioning our Commonwealth to transform the economies of the countries in the Commonwealth, which will enable inclusive development and climate resilience, and also respond to the expectations of the hundreds of millions across the Commonwealth for a good life. These areas are trade and investment, youth education, skills, innovation, and startups, mobility and labor markets, climate change, small states, and last but not the least, managing resources for an effective Commonwealth institution. Based on a community-wide approach to comprehensive actions in these areas, we can transform the economies of the countries in the Commonwealth, enable inclusive development and climate resilience, and respond to the expectations of the hundreds of millions across the Commonwealth for the democratic dividend, which is consistent with an ambitious vision of the Commonwealth's values. So there are 6 areas, I will take them one at a time. Trade and investment. The largest number of citizens in the Commonwealth do not earn enough to power the production and market expansion that is needed to create economic security, whether in the industrialized or developing regions of the Commonwealth. Across the Commonwealth, policymakers struggle with policies to raise growth in isolation through austerity and high taxes. The pie is simply not capable of feeding everyone unless consumer-based market expansion considers the potential of our 2.5 billion population. This requires that we re-envision a framework for Commonwealth trade to end the stagnation that is widespread across our countries. We need to surpass the potential 2 trillion trade that we've set for ourselves within the Commonwealth. Should I be elected as Secretary-General, I will revive the idea of a free trade agreement among Commonwealth countries. Recent developments, including advanced negotiations between UK and India, the conclusion of free trade agreements by Australia and New Zealand with the UK, the initiation of negotiations for a free trade agreement between Canada and the UK, the conclusion of free trade agreements between the UK and several Commonwealth member states, as well as our own African continental free trade area, have changed the dynamics and have given us a unique opportunity to consolidate those agreements towards a Commonwealth-wide free trade agreement. To be transformative, any such trade and development agreement has to respond to the development needs and challenges of the developing countries in the Commonwealth. Our development partners would have to scale up their aid for trade disbursements to enable us to enhance our productive capacity. It is also necessary to have generous labor mobility commitments. Example is like what we can have, if we so wish, under the Seasonal Workers Program and the Recognized Seasonal Employer. Furthermore, it is necessary to have provisions which would encourage businesses from the developed members to invest in the developing member states, with due consideration given to Pacific Island states, the Caribbean, and small states in both services and the non-services sectors. A successful free trade agreement among Commonwealth member states would allow these states to reap the benefits of enhanced integration and participation in global and regional supply chains, and it will also boost their participation in the multilateral trading system. It could also be a model for WTO members for a synergic mix of regional and multilateral trade integration, as the WTO members struggle to conclude agreements to revitalize the organization. Should the Commonwealth, which has members at all levels of economic development, be able to conclude a free trade agreement, it would serve as an inspiration at the multilateral level. I believe so. Developed Commonwealth members and other donor partners should maintain and enhance non-reciprocal preferential market access mechanisms like duty-free, quota-free, also flexible rules of origin, and preferential treatment for services and service suppliers from small developing states in order to facilitate their integration in the regional and global value chains. The World Trade Organization, which regulates and promotes global trade, should also consider according effective special and differential treatment, and also channeling enhanced aid for trade and viable investment in hard infrastructure to help build the productive capacity of small states in order to reverse their marginalization in global trade. This also should be the case for the African states and the developing states. The Commonwealth should support the specific needs and concerns of small island states in fisheries subsidy negotiations at the WTO. Ocean sustainability in general and sustainable fishing stocks and practices are critical to the development of the ocean economy in island states, and especially to the millions of mostly poor people who make their living through fishing. Services provide a major area for re-envisioning, including potential wealth creation and life-enhancing areas of life, such as portability of health insurance, medical data, banking services, etc., are across our Commonwealth. Commonwealth businesses are key to developing the products, markets, and the integration needed to create a consumer boom and greater prosperity for all of us. Under youth education skills, innovation, and startups, young people in the Commonwealth constitute a third of all young people in the world. So every 1 in 3 young people are Commonwealth members. With advances in ICT, automation, and AI, and the innovations of social media for distance learning, building the tech and other workers of the 21st century for a Commonwealth-wide market of high knowledge, intensive innovation, and services is an achievable goal in the short term. We can do this if we put our minds to it. Closing the Commonwealth's digital gap in health, education, and trade, building the digital infrastructure to boost connectivity within and between Commonwealth countries should be the way forward. Taking advantage of the best practices and attainments across the Commonwealth, we can design core curriculum and common standards and facilitate access to borderless financing to ensure that we are the leaders in innovation, startups, and services in the world. Under mobility and labor markets, labor shortages and other rigidities, as well as the lack of opportunity, drive unsafe, disorderly, and unregulated migration that bedevil policy and public sentiment in the richer parts of the Commonwealth. A Commonwealth-wide mobility compact can help redress labor and skills demand through safe, orderly, and regulated migration, while the ability to teach or train young people wherever they live in the Commonwealth, as well as a common Commonwealth market, allows work and services to be exchanged without relocation of workers across borders. We all know that the young people who go on those perilous journeys do not want to leave their country, but they go in search of greener pastures. They go in search of work. And therefore, if through the Commonwealth we can provide them with work, I believe that they will stay and work in their countries. The next is climate change. It's a hot topic these days, and rightly so. We have witnessed the dramatic effects of climate change and natural disasters that sweep our blue islands, as well as flooding, drought, change in distribution of rainfall, drying up rivers, abnormal sea walling, locust invasion, and energy production and consumption in poor member states. We must mobilize to adapt to climate change and to withstand its impacts and those of the natural disasters which bring devastation to our continents. We need to build greater resilience and achieve sustainability, enabling us to reduce the risk of present and future shocks and accelerate progress towards fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is impossible to look at a future-looking Commonwealth without a robust Commonwealth strategy on climate adaptation. We need to achieve a resilient Commonwealth by enhancing climate change leadership and technical assistance. We need to unlock vital finance for vulnerable states. We need to build blue and green economies across the Commonwealth and help member states overcome external shocks. Within the Commonwealth, we have huge needs for development and installation of renewables. We also have leaders in the production and servicing of renewables. Some of the countries in the Commonwealth are known for their production and servicing of renewables. With credits and other financing from the richer part of the Commonwealth, we will ensure that each member of the Commonwealth benefits from the renewable revolution and low carbon transition of their economies. And those concerned about the cost of transition would be open to implementing the emission standards agreed to at the Conference of Parties. This is the true win-win. No one loses, including those who provide financing at market rates. I am committed to the net zero target. I know it is referred to as ambitious, but saving our islands and protecting our ecosystems and literally ensuring our survival as a species in the face of extreme climate events and economic reversals cannot by any stretch of imagination be referred to as ambitious. My ambition is to support Commonwealth countries to find common agreement in responding to climate change. The expectations of small island developing states must be the barometer of our goal, and the Commonwealth must continue to be a champion of the small island states. I am not unaware of the political cost of enacting the required measures for reaching net zero. We need to support countries to engage their populations in all of society approach to reversing climate change, including adopting a standard climate change act. It may be difficult, but it can be done because we are all affected by the ravages of climate change. We need to support countries to build non-partisan national consensus on climate. It is clear that unless we meet the 2030 goals, we shall not meet the net zero goal. Community-level climate action is required. It is true that in some parts of the Commonwealth, such as the Caribbean and the Pacific, citizens do not need convincing because they see the effects every day of their lives. But that survival response must be the case for all of the Commonwealth. A legal framework that recognizes the phasing out of subsidies for fossil fuels to achieve net zero by 2050, empowers states to implement policies supported by their citizens. While we fight hard to reverse the insufficient global response, we must find ways within the Commonwealth to secure sustainable energy security. That is why I have proposed the renewables revolution, because we cannot afford not to double down on renewable energy. It is the only way to save ourselves and our planet. We must explore ways to support the achievement of 100% electrification by 2030. Accelerated introduction of electric vehicles and outboard motors, as well as expansion of renewable energy sources to include offshore wind, tidal, and wave energy. And this is to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and also to reduce the environmental impacts that are associated with traditional energy production. The Commonwealth should be in the lead in convening all relevant parties to define critical actions through bold and innovative thinking, new strategic partnerships and instruments required to access, adapt, and exploit research and development on wind, solar, and offshore wind, tidal, and wave energy. I do not underestimate the importance of climate financing for addressing the existential challenge of climate change, and the Commonwealth must continue to give voice to our family of nations on that score. The financing mix that is required depends on catalytic use of development finance and multilateral resources to leverage upfront private sector funding and investments. Innovation and strategic thinking will continue to be an important element for adaptation, especially since our states exercise more autonomy in that sphere. How do we build to reduce indoor heat, for instance? How do we ease indoor humidity? Another question. How do we build to promote more natural light indoors? From our homes to space-based new technology, we need to de-risk the low appetite for innovation and technology around climate change. Our small island developing states must be at the forefront of global efforts to achieve adaptation. The SIDS were leaders of the 1.5 degrees Celsius, and in this respect, I support Australia's leadership in hosting the COP31 in 2026 as the Pacific COP. We must not be blinded by the big outcomes of the COPs, such as reaching agreement on loss and damage, to forget about the need for other significant steps needed for faster progress. We need to look at the format for a big bang net zero moment by bringing together all who contribute to decision-making on climate action, regulatory change, financing, and etc. We also need to share best practices for instituting successful local consultations. This is extremely important. We are at different levels of development, different levels of dealing with the issue of climate change. And it is important that the 56 countries share their best experiences, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. What another country has done, what one country has done and has been successful at, share experiences so others can copy. We cannot approach climate change responses as business as usual. Small states and other developing countries are faced with hurdles that test the limited capacity of our countries in accessing funding and systems and procedures, as well as in meeting the requirements. We must expect the Commonwealth Secretariat to help shape a Commonwealth perspective on resilience, and that is shared by all the leaders and citizens, and that would form the basis of the advocacy on behalf of the Commonwealth countries, especially on behalf of the small island states and the countries that are more affected. Then I'd like to look at small states. Small states within the Commonwealth face unique development challenges. These countries are particularly vulnerable to exogenous shocks, such as natural disasters and climate change. With limited economic opportunities and significant migration, they often face capacity constraints. Small states remain susceptible to external shocks because of their geographic positioning, inherent structural challenges, and the deep integration into the global economy. Commonwealth should continue to put a special lens on small states and aim to build resilience and promote inclusive development in these vulnerable economies. We must prioritize small states to better access sustainable financing, to build resilience and have a voice in the global stage. Leveraging our convening power of member states for consensus building and the formulation of Commonwealth positions in key global policy fora and advocacy efforts to secure the uptake of Commonwealth ideas in strategic international decision-making bodies. And this is basically something that will benefit our small states and even our bigger states, because this is essential to achieve climate resilience and economic development. I now want to move on to managing resources for an effective Commonwealth institution. This is important, because if we are able to achieve this, you'll be able to go through all the areas of focus that I've talked about. And this entails an accountable, effectively run Commonwealth Secretariat. And I believe this is essential for realizing the ambitious goal of a new Commonwealth. Recently, the capacity of the organization has been weakened as member countries have funded work on a project-by-project basis instead of supporting the organization as a whole. The Commonwealth Secretariat cannot be a viable vehicle for transformation if it is treated as a consulting agency. It must be supported as a strong and independent multilateral organization, one that can count on adequate and predictable core funding on a consistent basis. And I'm convinced that agreement around the vision for a new Commonwealth will help unite the Commonwealth to rally around an effective secretariat. As Secretary-General, God willing, I will work with member countries to stabilize the Commonwealth's finances. An ambitious Commonwealth should be funded at comparative levels as other multilateral organizations are funded. Together with a more credible program resource envelope, it is time to review the human resourcing and budget of the Secretariat. This would enable more resources to be plowed back into programs, as well as ensuring a resilient Secretariat with long-term stability, attracting and retaining the best of the Commonwealth's talent in service of all members. Across the organization, we need to make decisions on how we take advantage of the expertise from member states, including from academia, research organizations, as well as the private sector. As we second them, we second our members, our citizens to the Secretariat to enable the cross-fertilization that will enrich the work of the Secretariat and also transform the Commonwealth. We should be creative in tapping into the pool of experienced and retired Commonwealth professionals. And there are many who want to offer their expertise pro bono to Commonwealth countries. I support the adoption of the International Public Service Accounting Standards, the IPSAS, as well as reforms of the governance system. This requires the formalization of the role of the Board of Governors as an executive board, reporting to the ministerial and the CHOGM, with the authority to discuss management, financial, and audit matters as in any comparable international organizations. In this regard, the periodicity of CHOGMs and the use of virtual conferencing to reduce cost and carbon footprints has to be part of our reform agenda. I propose to create a representational office in the Pacific, while upgrading existing ones in order to better serve the needs of members. For me, this is so important. There must be a representational office in the Pacific because of the very peculiar challenges with climate and other things that they face, so that we can have quick responses, proactive responses, reactive to their issues. This also requires greater coordination with Commonwealth Foundation and the Commonwealth of Learning in order to build on synergies and comprehensively realize the ambitious goals of reform. Similarly, the Commonwealth should ramp up its cooperation with international organizations, including the United Nations funds and programs to enhance the benefits of programming for Commonwealth countries. This is extremely important. Those partnerships are key in order that the Commonwealth will get close to the organizations that control funding, because all the member states are members of the big United Nations. And so if there are any funds, we should be able to access these funds. So to conclude, I believe that we are in this together. I believe that if we are to meet the ambitions of the citizens of the Commonwealth, it is clear that we need a development cooperation framework that works for all the Commonwealth as a community. Such a model cannot be based on the assumptions of progress, under which assistance from rich donors to recipient nations lead to slow, incremental change in the developing countries and locks in financial and other inflows to the donor countries. Either way, this is a cooperation model that is not working for industrialized or developing parts of the Commonwealth. We need to do things differently. We have to redefine the Commonwealth values. The commitment to democracy and peace, justice and human rights as the sum of a democratic dividend that includes guaranteeing a high living standard for each Commonwealth citizen, and also to provide social protection for all generations. While our historic association reinforces shared traditions and norms for our cooperation, our Commonwealth values should provide a standard for good governance, peace and security and prosperity, based on the empowerment of women and young people, both boys and girls. We need to amplify the voices of small and vulnerable states and advocate for sustainable development in terms of both the green and the blue economies. We need to acknowledge that the true value of our Commonwealth is our common health, our common well-being, and our common lives, building on our common values. We need to leverage our common wealth and economic potential, as well as potential for reprofiling to build resilience in the face of our changing world. As I said in a lecture in November 2022, the rich part of the Commonwealth needs the poorer part as much as the poorer part needs the richer part. And so unless we strategize on how to make the developing country members of the Commonwealth, who constitute 94% of the organization, We need to make them a vital part of an agenda of ensuring and promoting democracy and good governance, economic transformation, and resilience. And this is throughout the whole of the Commonwealth. If we do not do that, we shall all be the poorer for it. The Commonwealth is a powerful influence for good in the world. I believe this with my whole heart, and I know that you believe that too. And so, we must all pledge ourselves to the service of the Commonwealth now and for the future. Thank you for your attention.